One of the internet's recent hot button issues has been that of trans athletes, people who transition their gender and then go to compete in the other gender's sports competitions. And it makes a lot of people upset for various reasons, whether they are or are not allowed to compete. And I don't think that this is an issue with a clear-cut answer in the way that it might seem like there is to a lot of people. You see, fairness in the first place is a marketing scheme. The idea of fair competition is something that we invented just for the sake of making sports more interesting for the viewer. Because ultimately, sports are worthless. Sports have no intrinsic value. There is nothing that they really offer other than something that is entertaining for people watching it and that is, engaging for people participating in it. But for the same reason that there are, not every sport is nationally syndicated. Not every sport has a major competition. Not every sport is cared about by a large number of people. We only value sports that we just happen to care about. If one gets popular, if enough people are playing it, if it's engaging enough to watch happen. So the whole idea of segregating sports into male versus female is that, in general, because men are just uniformly more physically capable than women, it's more entertaining to watch men compete with other men and women compete with other women, so that there's not just blowouts all the time, so that it's not just always the men winning, so that there is, an ability for female athletes to at least be the best woman at the sport, and therefore, be able to have their own careers, be able to, create a sport environment that is entertaining in its own right as a separate environment from the one the men are in. Again, there is no actual fairness in sports. Some people are just born more physically capable than others. Some people have freakish mutations that allow them to just be unstoppable at their sports. I mean, from the get-go, to even be good at sports, you need to be a certain level of just physically adept. You're not going to be, a star sportsman if you are, for the most part, if you're under 6 feet tall. I mean, even just basic things like height and muscle structure are important, and there's always going to be a combination of course, hard work and guts. Of course, you need to push yourself. Of course, you need to train all the time if you want to be a good sportsman. But, if two people who both train equally hard and do everything right, but one has physical advantages over the other, are competing against each other, the guy with the physical advantages ultimately is going to win if all other things are equal. So, we can't, act as though fairness has ever really been a major factor in this. It's not about the fact that having trans athletes compete, say, men transitioning to women compete against other women is unfair. It's that it's not entertaining. It's that watching one of them win every competition because they were born with just a completely different, body structure, it is too transparently unfair. It is too it's too obvious what their advantages are, and that they would, of course, win all the competitions that they participate in, and that makes it boring. And that's ultimately what's going to matter, because when it comes to sports trying to make decisions about what they should or shouldn't do with their rule sets, of course it always, what matters the most is publicity. If a sport introduces a bunch of new safety rules, it's not because they think that is necessarily the most moral way to perform the sport. It's that there's enough public outcry against the problems that the sport has, on people's health, that it causes them to rethink what they're going to do to save face with the public, to court popular opinion. So the fact that trans athletes are being allowed to compete right now is part of publicity. The people who are running these sports think that that is what the most people will want. They think that appealing to the people who want trans athletes to compete will be good publicity. Personally, I think that pendulum's going to shift. I think there's going to come a point where enough people are upset with trans athletic competitors that they will stop allowing them. And that will be a controversy in and of itself. It's kind of a no-win scenario for the sports people, but I mean, to me, it seems like the obvious solution would be to create trans sports leagues. I mean, it's not about being exclusionary. It's just about the fact that from the beginning, this has never been about fairness. It's always been about publicity. It's always been about what people will want to watch, what people will pay to watch. And if people are not going to want to watch trans athletes compete in regular competitions, they're eventually not going to be able to. And I think that there are enough people who would support a trans league that it could be successful in its own right, that it could have its own, popularity. Because what is the point of getting to compete in one of these competitions other than popularity? It's not as though, competing in the Olympics means that you are the best in the world at whatever that competition is. You're just the public face of it. You're not literally the best, because not everyone in the world who even would be capable of competing is competing. And not, it's kind of like, I think of the dojo destroyers from classical Japanese times, where there would be all these dojos who are, recognized as practicing like their sect of martial arts, and if those dojos competed with each other in like sanctioned competitions, then whoever came out on top would be the one considered the strongest dojo. But then you could have just an unlicensed fighter who just is stronger, who just comes in and beats up all the leaders of the dojos, and it's like, for them, they have the personal gratification knowing that they're the strongest, but they will not be publicly recognized as the strongest because they haven't gone through the official channels. So if you're going through all these official channels, if you're trying to be, the best in the world as per the guidelines, of these companies, well, then at that point, it's just ego-driven. It's just publicity. It's not about literally being the best version of yourself that you can be. You're just participating in a system that will have the most eyeballs on you so you can get the most famous you can. And I can't necessarily say that that is inherently respectable as a goal to me. I don't necessarily think that if you're going in to a competition because you just want to be known as the champion, that is something, worthy of getting up in arms to defend someone's right to do. So yeah, I just think that if it's really just about, being able to be recognized as a woman and to compete, you can create a league that is for, trans athletes recognized as a trans woman's league. I understand that a lot of trans women don't want to be thought of as trans women. They just want to be thought of as women. But like when it comes to marketing, if the audience knows that you're a trans woman and you're destroying your competition, they're always going to come out of it thinking, well, no shit, of course you won. You just got to kind of deal with the fact that you are in a position to be not seen as a regular competitor. Like, you aren't normal at this point, And I'm saying this as somebody who myself does not consider myself normal, who does not, think that I have the ability to claim that I just am a regular person. Like, I wouldn't put myself in a situation where that comparison was necessary because I know that it's impossible. So, yeah, I'm kind of getting off into the weeds at this point, but I just, my overall point is that it's not really a question of fairness. If it was a question of fairness, you'd have to change all kinds of things about sports already. It's a question of what do people want. And maybe people will fall on the side of wanting trans athletes to be able to compete, but I think that because of the fact that the only reason these divisions were made in the first place was to make the game more exciting, it's going to come back in the other direction. Eventually it's going to be like, well, this has made women's sports suck, so, let's find another solution.